Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the cannabis industry, the beverage industry specifically. We're based in Toronto in Canada. Is there anyone here from Canada, folks? All right, go Raptors. So I think what we should really look at, because a lot of companies are looking at beverages as an alternative delivery system for cannabis, we actually view it as an alternative to alcohol. So we believe that there's a disruptive opportunity for cannabis beverages as an alternative to alcohol. Alcohol has been in the same basic format, the same basic structure, wine, beer, and spirits for thousands of years without any real disruption. And so we believe that there's a real opportunity to provide consumers with a healthier and safer alternative to alcohol in the form of cannabis-infused adult format beverages. So, right now there's a lot of knowledge in the room. I'm going to skip through some of the industry-related things that I think are probably, apple pie kind of stats, but Canada was the first G7 country to federally legalize marijuana, and cannabis beverages will be legal in Canada as of October 2019. The products won't appear in the marketplace until late December. There's still regulatory and testing and Health Canada approvals to get through, and our plan is that our products will be available in the spring of 2020, and hopefully the Canadians in the room will be drinking our rosé and our cold beer all next summer. So when you look at what are the drivers of cannabis consumption, right now it's really recreation. About 80% of consumers that consume cannabis that had a medicinal license are actually using it for recreational purposes. So when you look at the moods, the times, the places where people would consume cannabis, those very closely mirror the same occasions when people would consume alcohol. Beverages are the most socially acceptable format for any intoxicant use. If you look at the two most popular intoxicants on the planet are beer and wine. And beer is the vast majority of the industry, wine is number 2. In terms of revenues, we're looking at beer is about 42% of the alcohol market, wine's about 31-32% globally. So from a social acceptability standpoint, there's no acceptability for smoking or vaping. It's still something that has to happen in the back alley. Whereas when you look at beverages, we can do that around the dinner table, right? We share it with friends, we do it at our work functions. So those occasions where you can consume a beverage are far more acceptable and far more enjoyable and luxurious without any of the issues or the negative bias that comes with any other form of consumption. And gummies and those kinds of things are not really social. Once you have a gummy, then what are you going to do, right? There's no luxuriating over, a complex flavored gummy, right? So we don't, so I think that occasion really lends itself to the beverage format because it's something we can do and share and enjoy with a meal, with friends in a social environment. When you look at the beverage alcohol market, it shows tremendous potential for cannabis beverages. The size of the alcohol beverage marketplace is dramatically larger than cannabis. Yet cannabis actually has the opportunity. In Canada, it's measured almost comparably to the size of the wine industry. The black market industry in Canada was measured around $6 billion. When you start to legalize and add other formats, there's an expectation it would grow to about $7 to $8 billion. The wine industry in Canada is about $9 billion. So comparably speaking, you're looking at something that's almost around that size. And when you look at the number of consumers who would actually enjoy a beverage, it's actually right now about double the number of cannabis consumers. So when you put cannabis into a beverage format, you actually acquire a whole new category of consumers that are not consuming cannabis now. They have no interest in smoking or vaping, and they have no interest in taking a gummy. But when you put it in a beverage, you start to attract a whole new category of consumer that are used to making that, drinking their intoxicant. They're used to sharing that with their friends, and that would enjoy, would try, and as long as the beverage is delightful and delivers a good experience for them, are going to make that transition. So there's that habitual expectation that when I drink this thing, I get a little bit intoxicated, I can enjoy that, I'll do that with my friends. If all of them are doing it, then I'll join in. The reason why we believe that cannabis is a healthier alternative to alcohol is really, fundamental. Alcohol is a toxin. It's actually a poison that in small doses gets us intoxicated. But it's actually the cause right now, according to the World Health Organization, of about 5% of all deaths annually in the world are attributed directly to alcohol consumption. Now, that's not alcohol abuse, that's alcohol consumption. Even in latest reports coming out, even 1 glass a day of wine can lead to about 20 forms of cancer. So when you look at the cancer, you look at liver disease, you look at kidney disease, you look at Alzheimer's, you look at arthritis, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, et cetera, all of those are disease states that are either caused by alcohol or contributed to by alcohol or worsened by alcohol. Yet what's really interesting is when you look at cannabis, cannabis is currently being researched as a therapy or treatment by almost all of the research foundations that are looking for cures and treatments for those exact diseases. Right? In Canada, the Arthritis Society has actually dedicated $25 million to research cannabis as a treatment for arthritis. Yet when you put it into a beverage, it actually gives you no hangover, it has a lot fewer calories, there's no toxicity, and especially in the Canadian regulations where we have a maximum of 10 milligrams per unit. So if you have a single beer, you can have 10 milligrams. If you have a 6-pack of beer, the 6-pack can have 10 milligrams. Right? If you have a single demi bottle of wine, that can have 10 milligrams, but if you have a 750 ml bottle of wine, maximum 10 milligrams. Right? So when you look at the overconsumption reports in the Canadian formats and with the Canadian dosage levels that are allowed by law, you're absolutely never going to have issues of overconsumption. So you're going to be delivering to consumers something that's safe to drink, something that's enjoyable to drink, something that ideally mirrors the onset and duration of alcohol and mirrors the intoxication level of alcohol in terms of the level of intoxicant you get when you consume it. Now when you take the alcohol out of beer and wine and other formats, you actually take out a lot of the empty calories. So you're dealing again with no toxicity, 60 to 80% fewer calories, and no hangover. So a lot of the main issues that people have with alcohol, cannabis really actually solves. So as an alternative to alcohol, it's a really compelling proposition. Let's go back a couple here. So when you look at the opportunity for edible formats, you've got this huge $250 billion industry that is beverage alcohol in Canada and the US. You have a huge future marketplace when you start to legalize and start to move into legal markets such as Canada. When the US ultimately becomes federally legal, you're going to see a marketplace that's probably around $65 billion in the next 5 to 7 years that is addressable with a beverage format. It's more socially acceptable. It automatically deselects minors. Children, my kids never once got into my wine cellar and cracked open a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon thinking it was grape juice, right? They just automatically know that product is for mom and dad, not for them. Whereas when you put a plate of gummies on the table, nobody really knows what that is, right? What's involved. So the microdose effect is something that mirrors that onset and duration, and the occasions match the consumption occasions of alcohol. We're already seeing in the Canadian landscape, when you look at the major plays that have happened, so the 4 biggest beverage companies in Canada in the beer sector have already done deals with cannabis companies, right? They're looking at a $4 billion transaction between Canopy and Constellation. You're looking at $200 million that's already been invested between Molson and Hexo. You're looking at a $100 million joint venture just for beverage research, between AB InBev and Tilray. And you're looking at Moosehead, which is the largest privately held beverage company in Canada, has done a deal with Sproutly to produce a joint venture for cannabis-infused beverages. So when the marketing horsepower of all of these major multi-billion-dollar companies starts turning on, and they start actually understanding in a federally legal framework, which is the Canadian marketplace, they start to actually figure out what the formulations are going to be, what's going to resonate with consumers, what the dosage and technology needs to be in order to deliver a product that actually satisfies people's desires for matching an adult format beverage. You're going to see the marketplace mature. You're going to see a lot of the consumers start to adapt to this new format and start to make that transition. Alcohol-free beverages, which is the business that we started, and we specialize in alcohol-free wine and beer, is not just a niche, it's actually one of the fastest growing beverage categories in the world. Right now, we've actually achieved globally what I call peak alcohol. And that's essentially every year the alcohol industry globally is shrinking, right? In the US, the alcohol industry has been shrinking about 0.5% to 1% every year for the last 10 years. The major macro brands, so the Bud Lights and the Budweisers of the world, have lost, if you look at AB InBev's last annual report, they've lost 12.5% market share for their macro beer brands in the last 5 years alone. And they've lost that market share to the combination of craft beverages and cannabis, right? So people only have a certain amount of disposable income to spend. So how are they going to spend those dollars, right? And when the alternative is available, a certain percentage of the market, we've seen anywhere from 15 to 20% in states where cannabis is legal, reduction in alcohol sales by per capita by volume. So their alcohol companies are making that up by raising their prices, so they've got to keep their revenues growing, but when you look at the per capita volume sales, you're starting to see a serious impact on the alcohol industry. Yet alcohol-free products are actually exploding, and these numbers are from the Canadian marketplace, but when you actually look at those numbers around the world, it becomes one of the fastest growing beverage categories worldwide as consumers look to adult format versions of wine and beer as alternatives to alcohol, mostly due to health-related conditions, mostly due to those same conditions that alcohol actually causes. So it's not a niche. When you look at the North American landscape, you've got 135 million North Americans that are on a prescription drug regimen that's contraindicated to alcohol. You're looking at about 44% of the adult population. Yet almost none of those medications are contraindicated to cannabis. In fact, cannabis oftentimes will make the medication work more effectively. You currently have about half of all adults trying to reduce or moderate their alcohol consumption. So that's a global trend that's happening. And when you actually search, if you do an image search in Google and you just type in alcohol and celebrities, right? You don't get Cary Grant, you know, the image of a sophisticated martini drinker. You actually just get all negative imagery. And so the trend of media towards the positioning of alcohol as an influence in society is rapidly turning negative, right? It's turning negative. All of the media influencers around the alcohol industry are talking about the bad things that happen from the consumption of this product. And cannabis is there, especially in this format, to replace all of that part of the economy. We believe that we're in an extremely good position in the Canadian landscape because we have already perfected alcohol-free versions of wine and beer. We've won multiple US Open championships. We've won multiple world championships. We won the Retail Council of Canada's Grand Prix Award for the best new product for our alcohol-free lager. So we have already a regulatory format that allows us to build our business, that allows us to brand our products according to the exact regulations. So it's a level playing field. The big guys have no advantage over us because we all have to follow exactly the same regulations, exactly the same marketing restrictions, packaging restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. And as the regulations loosen up and open up, we'll have the ability to then expand our brand position from that landscape. We already produce, as a co-packer, major brands. We produce the President's Choice non-alcoholic wine in Canada. We sell about 1.5 to 2 million bottles of non-alcoholic wine through that process every year, plus a fairly significant amount of non-alcoholic beer as well. So when you look at the portfolio of established brands that we've been able to cultivate, so we have our beer and wine production that's already done. We just acquired a 50,000 square foot cannabis cultivation facility in Canada called One Leaf. One Leaf has a genetics portfolio of about 700 unique cultivars of cannabis. Over 90% of these cultivars are not commercially available in the legal landscape anywhere in the world. So we have the ability with our chief science officer to actually gene splice and hybridize cultivars of cannabis that will be optimized for beverage experiences. We have a licensed technology from Lexaria. They're actually presenting here as well. So actually yesterday, and this didn't make it into our presentation in time, but we actually signed the very first global patent license for Lexaria's technology to be able to market beverages with that technology worldwide. And we signed an exclusive manufacturing partnership in Canada for their powder. So they take full spectrum cannabis oil, turn it into an odorless and tasteless powder, and then it can be used as an ingredient in beverages or food production, all of those kinds of things. And we are the exclusive manufacturing partner for Lexaria in the Canadian marketplace. So we're very well positioned. We have already a distribution force in place. Lifford Cannabis Solutions represents quite a large number of licensed producers in Canada. So we've already been through the roadshow with all of the Canadian distributors and expect to be nationally distributed as soon as our products are available to go. And that will be literally in hundreds of retail locations right across the country. We also have exclusive research partnerships with 8 major medical foundations, including the biggest medical research foundations in the country, that are researching cannabis as a therapy or treatment for these issues, including arthritis, March of Dimes, which now in Canada represents post-traumatic stress disorder and brain injuries and brain cancer, the Liver Foundation, and the Prostate Cancer Foundation. So we have really leading edge partnerships. We were also the co-founders of the Cannabis Beverage Producers Alliance, which represents cannabis beverage producers as a lobbying group to the government. And we've had already meetings with every major provincial and federal government representatives to talk about our particular category and the unique licensing and regulatory requirements that we should be granted compared to smoking or other edible forms. As I said, we've got an award-winning portfolio of brands, so you can come and try a sample at our booth. We're right outside the front door. Plus, you know, the validation of the taste and quality of our products from third-party championships and competitions in terms of the flavor profile that we are generating. From a retail execution standpoint, we're already in about 7,500 distribution points in Canada. So we deal with major local retailers, Loblaws, Shoppers Drug Mart, Sobeys, thousands of locations across the country. We've got distribution, production, logistics, handling, all of those kinds of things. It's all sorted out. And our executive team has about 150 years of beverage industry experience on the team. So this is not something that we're trying to figure out. We've been doing this. I've been in the beverage sector for about 30 years. So it's something that we are very comfortable being able to create, formulate, manufacture, produce, and distribute. As I said, we acquired One Leaf, which is a 50,000 square foot cannabis cultivation facility. So we have that facility will be licensed in time for the beverage production marketplace to open up. Gives us extraction, processing, formulation, all under one roof with this incredibly powerful portfolio of genetics, including multiple landrace cultivars and multiple cannabis cup winners that are in our portfolio that are not commercially available. And the nice thing about the Lexaria technology is it allows us to actually take full spectrum cannabis oil, turn it into a powder, and then use that as an infusion ingredient into any beverage format. So in summary, just a little recap. We've sold well in advance of 1.5 million bottles of wine and beer over the last 12 months into the Canadian landscape. Market-proven infusion technology, significant benefits when compared to alcohol, and marketing partnerships that can reach about 23 million Canadians annually through our medical research partnerships. We've donated, with the cause-related brand strategy, we've donated about $1.8 million to medical research and behavioral research into how cannabis can actually be a therapy or treatment to those issues that are caused or complicated by alcohol. And our production facility is world-class. It was constructed to EU GMP compliant standards, so it's a pharmaceutical grade building that will be operational actually sometime in September. So, thank you very much. Fine. happy to take one or two questions, and then it will be available at the back of the room afterwards. So.
Also, two things. If there is space in between, if we can scooch everyone to the left, just like within your row so that we can fit more people. We have a lot at the back, and I'll pass around the mic. Wave your hand if you have a question next.
I have two questions on your de-alkalizing your wine and your beers. What process do you use? And then also, alcohol is a preservative. What things do you do, or how do you treat the packages so that your product stays fresh?
Yeah. So the question was around the de-alkalization process. So we actually use two different processes. With the wine, we use a vacuum distillation process where we're able to essentially evaporate the alcohol at about 25 degrees Celsius. That's, basically room temperature. No, it's a vacuum distillation process. So we basically put the wine into a vacuum, and then we use that, if you remember your high school physics, when a liquid goes in a vacuum, it reduces the transference of energy, so you can boil things at a lower temperature. So we're boiling the alcohol off without any impact on the liquid itself at about 25 degrees Celsius. So with the beer, we actually use a special yeast. The yeast does not produce alcohol, so it's an arrested fermentation process, so it's a special yeast that produces a zero alcohol beer. Preservatives, we use tunnel pasteurization and Velcorin, so it's a combination of Velcorin for the wine and tunnel pasteurization for the beer. So the products are shelf stable for 3 years. Question in the back over here.
What do you think the biggest hurdle will be for the cannabis beverage industry to start stealing share and consumers from spirits, from beer, from wine, from alcohol?
The biggest barrier for us is distribution. I mean, really, you're dealing with a marketplace in Canada. There may be 500 dispensaries across the entire country by the time we launch. We expect within 2 to 3 years, to get to about 2,200, 2,300 dispensaries. You compare that in Canada to about 12,000 places that you can buy alcohol. So the distribution is the biggest bottleneck, and it's because the government controls wholesaling. And in many places, the government controls retailing as well. So you have bottlenecks. The choke point is the regulator there is actually in Ontario, 14 million person province, there is one person who decides what beverages Ontarians get to drink relative to cannabis. So if you don't satisfy that one person's expectations for your products, you're not going to be on the shelf. So luckily, we have an excellent relationship with her, and I think we're expecting that things will go very, very well for us. So. Any other questions?
One more question, if anyone has one. Also, Terence will be in the back if you're shy.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.